My heart felt like it stopped as Robert's words sank in. My grandmother had spent her life collecting vintage rings, and now they were gone. Sold while I was away for 2 weeks visiting my sick aunt. I got a good price, Robert said, leaning against my bedroom door. Those old things were just sitting there. Better to turn them into real money. I folded a sweater slowly, keeping myself calm. And what did you do with the money, Robert? He shrugged and adjusted his fancy new watch. Invested it. That's what your mother and I do. We make smart choices. Unlike you, holding on to useless sentimental junk. My name is Elizabeth Chen, and at 34, I was watching my stepfather brag about selling the last thing I had left of my grandmother. But what he didn't know was that those rings weren't just family treasures. They were proof. Well, I said, placing another sweater in the drawer. I guess you're right, no point in living in the past. Robert's smug smile faded just a little. He had expected me to be angry, to cry, maybe even scream. But my calm response caught him off guard. Your mother agrees with me, he added, as if trying to justify himself. She says you need to move on. Grace has been gone for 5 years now. Hearing my grandmother's name from his mouth felt wrong. She had never trusted Robert. From the moment my mother brought him home 8 years ago, Grace had warned me. Watch out for that one, she had said. He's got sticky fingers and a silver tongue. She had been right. 3 years into their marriage, Robert, who was in charge of our family business's money, kept saying our financial problems were just bad luck. But Grace knew better. She started gathering evidence, tracking numbers, writing everything down. Her ring collection wasn't just a hobby, it was a code. Each ring had a story, and if Robert had looked closer, he might have realized that those stories were about him. I kept unpacking, remembering my last conversation with Grace before she passed. The proof is in the collection, she had told me. Each ring, each document, it's all there. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. I hadn't understood then. But over the years, as I watched Robert drain our family's money while pretending everything was fine, I finally put the pieces together. Where did you sell them? I asked casually, hanging up a dress. I might know someone who likes vintage jewelry. Robert waved a hand. Some dealer in Chicago. Paid in cash, no questions asked. Best way to do it. I nodded. Chicago. That confirmed my suspicions. Well, I said, closing my suitcase. I should get some rest. Long flight. Robert stayed in the doorway a moment longer, looking unsure. He had gotten what he wanted. The rings were gone. And he thought that meant the evidence was gone too. But what he didn't know was that I had been preparing for this. My grandmother had left behind detailed records, and I had already cracked the code. Each ring matched a financial transaction, proof of how Robert had been stealing from our family business for years. And thanks to my grandmother's careful planning, I had copies of everything, documents, appraisals, notes, all backed up safely online, waiting for the perfect moment. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the quiet creaks of the house. Through the wall, I could hear Robert and my mother talking in their room. She didn't even cry, Robert said, sounding annoyed. Just accepted it like it didn't matter. Maybe she's finally growing up, my mother replied. Learning to let go, like you've been telling her. I turned over and pulled my phone from under my pillow. It was time to act. I sent a quick message to Michael, my contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. It's done. He sold the collection, just like we expected. Chicago dealer, cash deal. Michael replied almost immediately. Perfect. That completes the pattern. We move forward. Are you sure? No turning back after this. I thought about my grandmother, how hard she worked to build our family's business, and how Robert had spent years stealing from it while convincing my mother he was helping. I'm sure. I typed back. It's time to finish what Grace started. The next morning, I drove to our family's flagship store in downtown Seattle. My grandparents had built the business from nothing, and now we had 12 locations across the Pacific Northwest. Profits had been dropping for years, even though sales were steady. As I walked through the showroom, I saw familiar faces among the staff. I remembered following Grace through the same space as a child, learning from her, not just about jewelry, but about honesty, about building something that lasts. Elizabeth. Robert's loud voice cut through the store. He walked toward me, arms open in an exaggerated welcome. Didn't expect to see you today. Thought you'd be resting after your trip. Just wanted to check in. I said, noticing how some employees stiffened when he got close. They knew something was wrong, even if they couldn't prove it. See how things are going. Everything's fine, he said quickly, too quickly. In fact, I was just about to make some calls about a new investment. Great opportunity. I had no doubt. Another fake company, another trick to move stolen money. I had studied Grace's notes and seen the patterns. Robert shifting funds through a tangled web of transactions, always staying just out of reach. Sounds interesting, I said. Maybe we can talk about it over lunch. I'd love to learn more about the business side of things. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. In all these years, I'd never shown interest in his financial dealings. My sudden curiosity put him on edge. Sure, he said slowly. Let's do lunch tomorrow. I have some important meetings today. Of course. I smiled. Tomorrow's perfect. Oh, and Robert? I called as he turned to leave. Thanks for handling grandmother's rings. You're right, it's time for some changes around here. He paused, searching my face for sarcasm. Finding none, he gave a short nod and walked off. As soon as he was gone, I sent another text to Michael. He took the bait. He's nervous about my sudden interest in the business. Good, Michael replied. Keep him talking. We've traced the Chicago dealer. Just need a few more days. I walked through the store, running my fingers over the displays, remembering Grace's lessons about quality and craftsmanship. Robert thought selling her collection had erased her influence. In reality, he had just given me the final proof I needed to expose him. Tomorrow's lunch would be interesting, but first, I had one more stop. I drove to the cemetery where Grace was buried, placing fresh flowers on her grave. The cool autumn wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of rain. It's happening, Gran, I whispered. Everything you predicted. Everything you prepared for. Robert finally made his move. I touched the simple gold ring on my right hand, the only one from Grace's collection that Robert hadn't sold. She gave it to me the day before she died, along with a single piece of paper. At the time, it didn't seem important. But now, along with all her other records, that paper would help bring down the man who had spent years stealing from our family while pretending to protect it. You were right, I whispered. The truth always comes out. Sometimes it just needs a little help. The next day was gray and drizzly. Typical Seattle weather. I arrived at Luciano's, Robert's favorite overpriced Italian restaurant, 5 minutes early. He was already there, sipping a martini at 11:30 in the morning. Elizabeth, he said, standing as I reached the table. Glad you could make it. I ordered you a glass of wine. Just water for me, I told the waiter. I need a clear head for business discussions. Robert's smile tightened. Of course, always so serious. Just like Grace. I pulled out a small notebook. Speaking of Grace, I've been going through some of her old business records. Interesting stuff. His martini paused halfway to his lips. Old records? What kind of records? Oh, transaction histories, supplier contracts, investment details. She was very organized. I watched him closely. Did you know she kept a file for every ring in her collection? Every purchase, every certificate, every business connection. Robert set his glass down hard. Those files were destroyed years ago during the office renovation. The paper copies, yes, I said. But Grace believed in backups. Digital copies, safe and secure. The color drained from his face. You're bluffing. There's no way. Robert. A new voice cut him off. 2 men in suits stood beside our table. I'm Agent Michael Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We need you to come with us. What happened next was almost like a movie. Robert jumped up, knocking over the table in his panic. He ran 3 steps before another agent blocked him. The restaurant fell silent as he was handcuffed and led away, shouting that he was innocent. I calmly sipped my water. Miss Chen, Agent Chen said, we'll need you to come with us to make a formal statement. I nodded, gathering my things. Of course, just let me call my mother first. That was the hardest part. My mother had always been brilliant at designing jewelry, but she trusted Robert completely with the business finances. Finding out he had been stealing from us for years would break her heart. As I listened to her sobs over the phone, I knew we had done the right thing. The truth hurt, but lies had already cost us too much. At the FBI office, I handed over everything. Grace's records, the connection between the rings and Robert's fraud, the fake suppliers, the hidden bank accounts. Your grandmother was brilliant, Agent Chen said, flipping through the evidence. She left a perfect paper trail of Robert's crimes hidden in the details of her collection. He thought selling the rings would erase the proof, I said. Instead, it only confirmed everything. The investigation moved fast. The Chicago dealer turned out to be one of Robert's accomplices, helping him launder money. The rings were recovered, each one still carrying its hidden evidence. Facing overwhelming proof, Robert took a plea deal, 8 years in prison and full repayment of the money he stole. The total amount shocked even me, nearly $12 million over 7 years. My mother filed for divorce right away. She put all her energy into rebuilding the business, turning her pain into something positive. Together, we updated our systems, improved security, and brought our family company back to its former success. 6 months later, I stood in the store's newly renovated vault, carefully placing Grace's recovered rings in a special display. Each piece sparkled under the lights, a symbol of the justice we had achieved. Your grandmother would be proud, my mother said softly, not just because we saved the business, but because you handled everything just like she would have, with patience and careful planning. I touched the simple gold ring I still wore, Grace's last gift to me. She had taught me that real justice isn't about revenge. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter how long it takes. That evening, I visited Grace's grave again. The rain had stopped and the night was clear. I placed white roses beside her headstone. We did it, Gran, I whispered. Robert never saw it coming. He was so focused on himself that he didn't see the truth right in front of him. I told her about the business, how it was thriving again, and how her ring collection now stood as a symbol of strength, inspiring the next generation of women in our family. On my way home, I passed the prison where Robert was serving his sentence. I didn't stop or even slow down. He was part of the past now, a lesson in trust and vigilance. The next morning, a package arrived at the store. Inside was a letter from Robert's former secretary and a stack of documents. I always knew something was wrong, she wrote, but I was too afraid to speak up. Your grandmother once told me that the truth always finds a way, like a diamond rising through the earth. She was right. These are copies of everything I saved over the years, just in case someone was brave enough to act. I placed the documents alongside Grace's carefully coded records. Together, they told a story of greed and betrayal, but also of wisdom, courage, and justice. The business continued to grow. We created the Grace Chen Foundation, offering scholarships for women in business and forensic accounting. Every recipient received a small gold ring, a reminder that patience, intelligence, and careful documentation are the best tools against corruption. Years later, when Robert was released from prison, he tried to reach out. His lawyer sent a letter full of apologies and excuses, asking for a second chance. I sent back a single photo, Grace's restored ring collection, now displayed with the evidence that had exposed him. No words were needed. The truth, as Grace always said, speaks for itself. Some called it karma. Others called it justice. But I knew it was something simpler. A grandmother's love and wisdom kept alive in a collection of rings worth more than anyone had imagined. Well, anyone except Grace. The last paper she gave me, the one that once seemed unimportant, now hangs framed in my office. In her elegant handwriting it says, "The truth is like a diamond. It may stay hidden for years, but its value never fades. Watch, wait, and when the time is right, let it shine." And shine it did, bringing light to darkness and justice to those who thought they were untouchable, just as Grace had planned all along.